Hello, my Bill 1000 Nation. How's everyone doing today? Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. If not, I hope it gets better from here. We are back with another, excuse me, Coffeehouse Crime. This one is titled The Wannabe Serial Killer That Murdered for Revenge. All right, I'm excited for today's story. Let's go ahead, turn them lights down low, put on something comfy, couple with someone special. Let's get concerned. Very concerned. I'm concerned. Yeah.
Stephen Farrow was a dangerous man with extremely worrying antisocial behaviors. And as an adult, he became a lonely drifter who survived off handouts and the backs of other people. The disheveled man blamed his way of living on a tumultuous childhood, further claiming that the church had wronged him. And over the years, this hatred manifested itself into intense levels of hostility. In fact, it would eventually blow out in one of the most violent ways possible, filling the rural communities of Western England with concern and forcing many religious figures to hide in fear. The question is, what caused Stephen Farrow to snap so viciously? An excuse which covered his psychotic personality, or both?
What the fuck?
Welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name is
This one's gonna be a fucking good one, bro. Oh, I'm so excited.
Adrian, and today we're looking at the case of Stephen Farrow. Before we begin, and just to let you know that I post up to 4 times a week here, 2 long videos and 2 shorts. So if darkly fascinating stories is your sort of thing, please consider subscribing. And now folks, with all that out the way, please grab yourself a coffee, pull up a seat and get ready for the deep dive. This is the case of Stephen Farrow.
And if you haven't already, go ahead, check it out. Links in the description. Go to the Bill 5000 store. Get you a nice Bill 5000 mug. Enjoy that cup of coffee. Makes the coffee taste better and keeps it 10 times warmer. No, I mean, it's just a coffee cup. But I like it.
Nestled in the western reaches of the United Kingdom, West England unveils a mesmerizing tapestry of landscapes, rich heritage, and cultural allure. And with it often being bathed in the soft glow of the English sun, this region is known for its scenic wonders. On the one hand, rolling meadows are adorned with vibrant wildflowers, and on the other, rugged coastlines create a dramatic backdrop. And thrown between these two compelling environments lies a never-ending backstory filled with medieval charm. Villages with thatched roofs and cobbled streets evoke a bygone era, where the pulse of daily life beats to the rhythm of tradition. It's a place where modernity seamlessly intertwines with history, and creates a unique blend that characterizes the area. This is West England, folks, a place that I myself have had the chance to call home. And whether you're here for a day or a year, you will find yourself mesmerized by its natural beauty. In a place well known for its churches, cheddar and charm, it's easy to forget about the pressures and woes of life here, which is probably what makes this story of dark and desperate murder all the more haunting. Today, we're focusing on one particular man from the Farrow family. His parents, Reg and Doreen, raised a large family of 6 children, and
I mean, that's a pretty good sized family, though. But, I mean, what else you got to do? I mean, beautiful scenery like that, take a picnic, things happen, come home, boom, another baby. It happens.
this video shines the spotlight on their youngest child, Stephen. Now, it is crucial to know Stephen's upbringing, so that we can better understand how this child turned into such a vile and disturbing man. Born in the year 1964, Stephen was the product of an unplanned pregnancy, and soon after birth, it quickly became...
I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, how many kids in the world are actually planned? You know what I mean? I mean, there might be a little thought put into it, but I mean, when it comes to kids, they pretty much do what they do, bro. It just is what it is.
Evident that he was not your average child. He was often described as the black sheep of the family, and his mother would often say that she believed something was inherently wrong with him. I mean, she did still love him all the same, even if he was quite a challenge to deal with.
That's awful.
As a young kid, he would never sleep at night, which, as you can imagine, kept both of his parents awake at all hours. And Doreen would later go on to say that, if she was given a second chance, she would rather have her other 5 children all over again than a second one like Stephen. He was extraordinarily hyperactive from a very young age, and during his first day of school was even sent home due to bad behaviour. Stephen also developed various antisocial tendencies throughout his childhood too. And unfortunately, I'm not talking about minor things either. You see, Stephen's family were very religious and would go to church every single Sunday. But Stephen, he despised religion, and so, at the age of 10, he set fire to the altar and watched it burn. Now, nobody knew it at the time, but decades later, Stephen...
I don't think you're supposed to do that. I don't think you're supposed to do that at all. I'm pretty sure that's a hellable offense.
would go on to claim that just a year prior to this incident, a priest had assaulted him, and that's why he hated religion so much. The problem with this excuse, though, is that it didn't stop at the church. Stephen had become quite the arsonist as a child, and would set fire to almost everything, and this included rags through letterboxes. While these incidents never resulted in any injuries or death, they did present concerning behavior for a young boy, especially considering that he hadn't even entered.
Arson's pretty fucked up behavior for anybody, man. Who cares if no one got hurt? Little some bitch trying to burn the world down. Punch him in the face. Elbow him in the throat. Poke him in the eye. He'll learn.
His rebellious teenage years yet. Strikingly, this conduct would only intensify in both frequency and severity over the years. Yet, all the same, his brothers and sisters continued to label him as his mother's favourite. Now, Stephen harboured a deep affection for his mother, but his relationship with his father, Reg, would take a markedly different turn. Reg maintained a strict and well-ordered household, a structure that the young boy would, of course, inevitably rebel against. And this defiance would persist throughout his teenage years, accompanied by the development of other morbid behaviours. In a troubling parallel often seen in those with a murderous trajectory, Stephen displayed a tendency toward cruelty and violence towards animals. This was a disturbing trait.
So he is like one of them little fuckers that would like tie bottle rockets to cats and poke the eyes out of frogs and type of shit. Man, fuck that, bro. What did the little woodland creatures do to you, homie?
Evident in his childhood, and many of those animals faced death in the process.
That's
Defined
fucked
by
up.
cruelty, disobedience, and outright antisocial tendencies, it is no surprise that, in the year 1979, and at the age of 15, he faced a burglary charge, which led to enrollment in disciplinary school. Now, despite this intervention, which, by the way, separated him from his family and his loving mother, it failed to curb his uncontrollable behavior. And just 3 years later, in
poor
1982, Stephen was found guilty of arson, which resulted in a brief stint in prison. Now, after being released from prison, Stephen did manage 12 whole years without
Should kept his ass in there. Probably done the world a favor. Probably would have done the world a fucking favor.
any other arrest. But this wasn't because he had become a law-abiding citizen, oh no. In fact, he'd just simply learned how to avoid the authorities. Throughout this decade, he remained to be a terrible example of lawful behavior and skirted the line of crime, engaging in petty thievery and various burglaries without any detection. He danced on this fine line for many years, but his life would remain unstable, and as the man grew older, he adopted a transient existence as a homeless drifter. At times, he sought refuge with family or friends, sometimes lived in various halfway houses, and often found himself sleeping on the streets. This concerning lifestyle persisted until the year 1994, when he found himself convicted of aggravated burglary after breaking into an elderly woman's home in Stourbridge. As a result, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison, and due to his previous conviction being made at such a young age, he would also undergo a psychological evaluation. Some very concerning details emerged through these sessions. I mean, for one, he confessed to a psychiatrist that he fantasized about sexually assaulting women in front of their husbands. To make these fantasies even worse, he then expressed that in the aftermath he wanted to murder those husbands before then going back to torturing the women. No surprise, these confessions led to Stephen being officially diagnosed with psychopathy, a mental health disorder that exhibits impulsivity, a lack of empathy, and antisocial behavior. Now, despite this information being shared with the judge and other relevant authorities, Stephen would actually be released from prison 1 year early in the year 2000. I mean, stating the obvious here, but it is absolutely astounding that a diagnosed psychopath with violent tendencies was allowed to roam free and early,
It makes no
especially
damn
after
sense, bro.
confessing such terrible dark thoughts. Either way, he was once again a free man, claiming benefits, abusing drugs and alcohol, and abusing the relationships of those who cared about him. He financially survived by claiming state benefits through the council, receiving just over £270 or $340 weekly. Now, for someone down on their luck, this was actually a very manageable sum at the turn of the new millennium. Taking a quick look, the average rent for a one-bedroom property back then was only £79 a week. Despite this though, Stephen carried on as a homeless drifter without a stable home, and sadly, his criminal activities would carry on for many years after this. But in the fateful year of 2012, and at the age of 48, Stephen Farrow's life would take on a whole new realm of darkness. It was at the turn of a new year that worrying signs of Stephen's mental health began to emerge. One of his friends woke up to an ominous text message from Stephen.
I love
reading,
fireworks.
"The church will be the first to suffer." Dark and strange, yet quite typical
Why?
for Stephen, his friend did not think too much of it. His hatred for Christianity was common knowledge to those around him, and most of them chalked it up to his rather unsteady upbringing. However, this sentiment would change the very next day, because on January the 2nd, in the sleepy town of Thornbury, one particular family returned to the home of Vine Cottage. Upon arrival, the family home was dark, cold, and quiet, and after turning the lights on, it became apparent that not everything was as it should be. The house had been ransacked, with open drawers, cupboards ajar, and belongings strewn around the property. But the most concerning clue was found on the kitchen table. Words were hastily written onto a note, which had been stabbed into the table with a knife. The note said, "Be thankful you did not come back, or we would have killed you, Christian scum. I hate God."
What the fuck?
No surprise, they called the police immediately, and although officers did examine the crime scene, there was sadly not much they could do. Burglary is quite common out in the countryside, especially over the holidays. Something to remember for later on, but investigators would find a boot print and swabbed the house for any DNA evidence. It was ultimately concluded that this home was not personally targeted, but utterly random. They know this because whoever written that note was very critical of Christianity, but those people living in that house were not religious at all. So, whoever written that note, it was either a shot in the dark or entirely by mistake. But sadly, this would not be an isolated incident.
Is that a 316 or is that a 318? It could be 315. Oh shit. Let's just split the difference. 315, 316, 31. Let's just go 316. All right. Break in there, leave all that shit, and it was like neither one of them. It was like 413 or some bullshit. Oh, is anyone around there really big Christian? Like, you might want to go door to door, be like, "Do you believe in God and Jesus as your Lord and Savior?" Yeah, I think someone was trying to break into your house. How you know? Because you're the first one that said, "Heck yeah."
And not only a few days later, the authorities would receive another phone call. Another break-in was reported in a rural town in Gloucestershire. Only, this time, the consequences would be far more severe. Throw yourself 60 miles north of our former burglary, and you will find the sleepy town of Bewdley. Bewdley was next in line to report a home invasion. However, this one harbored a much more sinister secret. Arriving at the crime scene, responding
stuff.
officers found the lifeless body of an older woman. It
Aw.
appeared as if she had been stabbed 4 times in the neck with a knife, and
What the
beaten with
fuck?
what was later identified to be her walking stick. Furthermore, it seems that she'd been hit so hard with that walking stick that it had splintered over her body. The body was eventually identified to belong to a retired teacher by the name of Betty Yates. At the wise age of 77, she was a physically vulnerable woman. She had taught locally at the former St. John's Middle School, and was well known for hosting book readings and attending art and walking groups. The news spread like wildfire across the region, and although these 2 incidents were not yet linked, the authorities pleaded for any information which might help find.
Man, she looked like a sweet old lady too, bro. All smiles and shit. Damn, man.
Betty's killer. A community-led anonymous tipping company named Crime Stoppers UK offered £10,000 for any information leading to an arrest. This, of course, the equivalent of around $12,600. In addition to this, the BBC evening show Crime Watch also highlighted Betty's murder and pleaded for any information that may help. But despite their urgent pleas for action, no new information emerged as the days passed. And much to Betty's family's distress, they remained no closer to finding her assailant. In fact, things would get worse several weeks later, when yet another violent crime was reported. And tragically, this one held a very similar outcome. On the morning of February the 14th, and in
It's the little put fucker, wasn't it? Guarantee it was the little put fucker. Can't tell me it wasn't the little put fucker. Yeah, that's the words of the day. Pud fucker. Because that's that fucker.
the small town of Thornbury, 2 local builders were scheduled to conduct maintenance at a local vicarage owned by Reverend John Suddards. But after knocking on the front door, they received no response from the vicar. With an already established friendship with the vicar, both men felt quite comfortable to enter the property and begin their work. But upon entering the vicarage, they immediately sensed that something was wrong. Just as before, the house was cold, dark, and eerily silent. And upon further investigation, the 2 men came across a puzzling and horrific scene. A trail of blood led them to the main room, and in the center of that room lay the lifeless body of John Suddards. He was cold to the touch and appeared to have been stabbed 7 times with a knife. But that was not all they had come across. The builders noticed several items symbolically placed around his body. To begin with, on his chest lay a Bible, which was open to the letter of Jude. The letter of Jude is a short section of the New Testament that condemns enemies of Christianity, and, perhaps more symbolically, that their enemies are within the faith itself. The letter of Jude speaks of false teachers who twist the word of Christ for their very own gain, and most notably in this case, to satiate their lust. Propped against the wall next to John's body was a framed image of Christ, and at his foot was a large mirror reflecting toward the body. This was placed as if the killer wanted the victim to look at Christ and then at himself in a symbolic gesture of guilt. In addition to this, long strands of tissue paper were found throughout the crime scene, almost as if party poppers had been used in an act of celebration. To add to the chaos, broken china and various foods
Yes, I giggled. I don't know why I giggled, but I giggled like a little kid. It was great. Did he literally just say that this motherfucker went through with those little poof confetti fucker things and celebrated? Bro. What the fuck?
were scattered on the floor, with empty beer bottles found throughout the living room. Strange details aside, there is no doubt that the manner in which John was killed was filled with anger, an anger directed at John himself or the religion that he stood for. As we already know, this incident followed a similar crime only 1 month prior, which was further marked by another burglary displaying an intense aversion to Christianity. The escalation of this hostility did hint at a perpetrator who had taken their disdain to the next level, and with a potential serial killer now in the making, fear instilled itself into the rural and urban communities of West England. Nobody knew who this killer was, or if they would strike again. The general public was now on high alert, the authorities vigilant, and religious communities struck with an intense level of terror. Thankfully though, it wouldn't take long for a suspect to emerge. Surveillance footage captured a man fleeing the crime scene. At approximately 6:15 in the morning, he then appeared to board a bus towards Bristol, before catching another bus that would take him to the south coast of England. Now perhaps no surprise to you and I, this man was later identified to be Stephen Farrow. And so, on February the 18th, only 4 days after the second murder, he was officially declared to be a suspect for both the burglary and the murder of John Suddards. The authorities announced that he was officially on the run and urged the public not to approach him. Behind the scenes, after arriving on the south coast, he travelled to Folkestone in Kent, and by now, unknown to him at the time, the authorities had learned of his name and his whereabouts. Due to his nomadic lifestyle, it was quite hard to track him down, and although eyewitnesses came forward to say they'd seen him, there was no concrete evidence behind this. By now, the authorities had grown confident that Stephen was likely behind the deaths of not just Betty, but John as well, officially making him a suspected double murderer. And just as their confidence was growing, a tip from the far west of England came into the authorities. A woman called to claim that, allegedly, a man was staying in her guest house in Folkestone, Kent, and that she was pretty sure it was Stephen. With a rather keen interest in finding him, the authorities went down to this guest house to check it out. And lo and behold, this tip was screaming inaccuracy. Stephen was therefore arrested on the spot and taken down to the local police station for questioning. And with this happening on February the 19th, this ended his 5-day stint on the run. And so began the long and arduous task of finding Stephen Farrow guilty or not guilty. Yeah. Following his arrest, he was officially charged on suspicion of murdering Betty Yates and Reverend John Suddards. The prosecution team described both murders as sadistic, further commenting that they were the result of a deranged killer, to which Stephen perfectly fit the profile. Now, these statements would also become factually correct, as upon further psychiatric evaluation, he was diagnosed with psychopathic personality disorder. Psychologists would also note other disturbing behaviors. For one, he exhibited narcissistic behaviors, and would say anything that he thought the other person wanted to hear. He further led experts to believe that he was a pathological liar, that he was arrogant with an inflated sense of self-worth, and that he was extraordinarily opinionated and deemed dangerous to be around. By now, Stephen's case had become notorious throughout the United Kingdom.
So he's straight cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Damn, homie. Elevator don't go all the way to the top floor. Gotta be difficult.
And with this new psychological evaluation, many began to ask why such an individual was released back into the public.
Right.
Moving into the legal proceedings of this case, Stephen was charged with burglary and 2 counts of murder. He would surprisingly admit to the burglary, but claimed that he was innocent of both counts of homicide. To add to this, he further taunted the prosecution by claiming that there was no way that they could prove he was at either crime scene. It wouldn't take long to build a case against him, though. Before that, various aspects had to be taken into account. This including his mental health, his previous run-ins with the law, and his evasion in the days after John's murder. Stephen's trial began on October the 4th, 2012. And proceedings would last for almost a month. This is partly due to Stephen refusing to leave his cell for scheduled proceedings. In fact, he would only be present for his sentencing at the end of all of this. To begin with, his defense pleaded guilty to the burglary, but not guilty to the murders.
I don't understand that reasoning.
Until undeniable evidence linked him to all crime scenes. proceedings. Boot prints that matched the boots he wore during his arrest were found outside Betty's house. And if that wasn't enough already, his DNA was found in the rooms of both murders. And so, with nowhere to run, Stephen changed his story. Although he pleaded not guilty to Betty's murder, he would plead guilty to the manslaughter of Reverend John Suddards. Of course, with the caveat that it was on the grounds of a diminished mental state. Following this adjustment to his story, he would go on to describe the new scenario in a new statement to the judge. Both alone and isolated in an abandoned hut, and apparently baked out of his mind, Stephen planned John's murder for the next several days. And apparently, that weed made him paranoid and then tilted him over the edge. Stephen had long fantasized about killing a member of the church, and now was his opportunity. As a vicar, John had an open-door policy and always wanted to help other people in their time of need, which is how he allowed such a monster to get close to him. Stephen took advantage of this and murdered him in cold blood, but not before humiliating him first. As John lay there dying on the floor, he surrounded him in props and told him to just hurry up and die already. Now, this 4-day premeditation clearly demonstrated a genuine intent to commit murder, and so his plea for manslaughter was ultimately rejected. On November 2nd, 2012, the jury would deliberate for just over 9 hours, and as expected, they would ultimately find Stephen Farrow to be guilty of both counts of murder and burglary. When it came to John's death, the jury was unanimous. But sadly, the same could not be said for Betty's murder. An 11-to-1 majority would find him guilty, but one jury member would change their mind when they discovered that the two were previously acquainted. In the end, Stephen Farrow was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for his crimes.
Hell yeah.
And this is likely for the best too, to be honest.
Yep.
Personally, I don't doubt that.
Cause them fellers in there get awfully lonely on them cold, long nights. They need some of that sweet, sweet loving. And they gonna take it. He ain't gonna give it. They gonna take it. It just puts a smile on my face, man. Piece of shit.
Someone like Stephen is capable of re-offending further down the road. The judge put it quite bluntly, saying, "In each of these dreadful killings, you acted sadistically. To put a knife deep into the body of Betty Yates as she lay helpless on the floor was obvious sadism. She was not threatening you. You put the knife in her to have the pleasure of doing so. As for Reverend Suddards, you killed him, having kicked him down, having told him to hurry up and die." It became apparent through his trial that nothing would come of his claims that he was assaulted as a child. Unfortunately, that is something we will never find out. It is possible that his childhood trauma is legitimate, and if it is, that is devastating news to learn. But you can probably see where I'm going with this. Nothing can ever excuse you for murdering an entirely innocent man or woman. Speaking of, there is nothing that Stephen, or anyone else for that matter, can do to bring back the lives of Betty Yates and John Suddards. It's a shame that two gentle people were murdered by a man so evil and callous. Described as a wonderful woman, Betty was a 77-year-old widow with a loving family that surrounded her. Her daughter, Hazel, spoke after Stephen's trial.
Well, at least she's, you know, wherever she's at on her other side of the journey of life with the person that she loves. I mean, it's sad that she was taken, but at least she's with the person she loves. I mean, that's kind of sweet, though. Not the murdery, stabby part. That's just fucked up. But glass half full, people. Shit.
Addressing the press, she said, "There is at least now some public justice for my mum, but our personal loss remains raw and will continue. For us, it is important that our mum does not become defined by the brutality of her death, but rather is celebrated for the 77 years of her life." John Suddards is a man who should be remembered for his own life too. In fact, his life was much more outside of his career as a vicar. Once a former lawyer living in Essex, he changed his career path after surviving a car accident. He moved to Worcestershire only 7 months before his life was taken away from him, and his sister, Hilary, expressed that the judicial system needs to reconsider their guidelines on who they let out into the world. As many of you will probably pick up, This mistake is surprisingly similar to my recent case of Claire Inglis. Following his life being saved, John became a man of God who wanted to help those in need. It is tragic to learn that it's for this reason that a monster targeted him. Following his incarceration, Stephen Farrow remained behind bars for the next 11 years. He passed away only 4 months ago in August of 2023, putting an end to his despicable existence. And hopefully, Betty and John's families will now find closure in knowing that he will never be able to hurt another soul again. And I guess with him now dead, we will not get any fresh updates in the future. This story has finally come to an end. And I guess on that note, that pretty much wraps up our case today, folks. Thank you so much for watching today. I really do appreciate you being here. Before you go though, what are your thoughts on this case? As always, please let me know.
Dude's a piece of shit. He gave a bunch of men, though, in prison some sweet, sweet love. And now he's dead. Life's amazing right now for me, bro. Because now he's in hell giving all them people down there sweet, sweet loving. It's all about the sweet, sweet loving people. Alright, I really enjoyed today's video. If y'all enjoyed today's video as much as I did, please leave a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want, go on over, smack that subscribe button, become part of the Bill 5000 Nation. We do some crazy shit here. If you want to know when that crazy shit happens and potentially join in on one of the premieres, ding that bell. If it works for you, jump in on that premiere, hop over on the live chat, be like, hey, Bill, bro, it worked. It dinged. I'm dinged. It's dinging me right now. It's dinging all up in my face. And then leave a like and dip. And that's all I ask. If you really want to support the channel, links in the description. Go check out my store. Got some amazing merch. You can't tell me otherwise unless you check it out for yourself. As always, be good to one another. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Ow, I hit my fingy. Adrian, bud. This one was like 3 different kinds of levels of fuckered upward. But I really enjoyed it. Beautiful scenery.